Hey people, it's your girl Shakima. I'm just stopping in for another podcast today for our Tools for Using Tools Tuesday segment. And I have chosen today's topic as the art of spiritual warfare. This particular topic was inspired by my own personal experiences since the Cancer full moon eclipse. And I just wanted to be able to share, I guess, in this space openly with everyone, things that I have been able to do and utilize throughout my own process. And also just to be able to give us an opportunity to, I guess, navigate through the process as a collective. You may hear sounds and tones like that in the background, kicking off from time to time. I'm in my own personal space. And I am unapologetically authentic about it. But yeah, let's just go and ease into it. All right, guys. So today's topic of discussion, the art of spiritual warfare. I mentioned that this was something that I was personally inspired to discuss because of my own personal experiences. I guess since the 10th of January, that was the Cancer full moon eclipse. And it's taught me a lot in the process, peeling back the layers of self and giving me an opportunity to be able to gain a deeper and broader perspective. So I wanted to be able to share that with you guys in the space. So we'll be looking at the arts. You know, when we think about spiritual warfare, we are generally sort of thinking about the things that we see on a person, but it's more or less the things that we're not able to physically see that really makes the battlefield, I guess, so constricting and so harmful in a lot of ways that we're not actually aware of. So today I wanted to be able to just look at the different layers, I guess, of dimensions when we think about manifestation in itself. And I also wanted to be able to look at how the different thoughts, words, actions, and intentions behind our day-to-day interaction may sort of impact the way that we are manifesting, the kind of, I guess, energies we're manifesting, the kind of entities attached to those energies, and pretty much just where we are in our own place of creating. To give us an opportunity to be able to see again, just have an open floor and discussion about the different ways that one can actually combat some of these energetic transactions that may be of a negative vibration or a low vibration of us. And these things are very real. I literally had to drag myself into this space because I was navigating my way through the spirit of procrastination. These are very real things. And I think a lot of the times, you know, we see ourselves doing some things and we don't necessarily understand. I think we understand because we're like, okay, cool, I feel like this in this moment. But because that emotion is actually, it's such a dense vibration, it's pulling us down into that reality, right? Whatever emotion we're feeling at that time, there is an actual spirit that is expressed through that emotion, and that becomes a physical manifestation of the experience that we're having. So sometimes, you know, we may not feel like doing something, but again, that's because the spirit of procrastination is attached to, I guess, the way that you're feeling in that moment. You kind of have to peel back the layers to gain perspective as to why you may be procrastinating. Because a lot of the times when we procrastinate on situations, it's usually attached to the entity, if you will, of fear. It's kind of fear perhaps that things won't necessarily work out, fear that if we start, we won't be able to stop, fear that if we actually do go ahead with something, we might fail. And that's like one of the biggest things for the ego, because the ego isn't necessarily willing to put itself in a situation where it's like, okay, I'm willing to get a little bit battered and bruised through the process of this to achieve the end goal. So when we're dealing with forces like the spirit of procrastination, we really have to go deeper into understanding and overstanding even our whys. If we're a little bit more aware of why we are doing certain things, it makes it a little bit easier for us to be able to, I guess, commit to the process, because a lot of the times some things that we might think in theory Yeah, no, we've got Prestige D here on IG saying that's been my biggest issue for a while. I think you kind of have to basically navigate your way through understanding what this spirit of procrastination is trying to tell you, because these spirits aren't necessarily bad, I guess, in a world where we want to be proactive. It's just we would naturally look at procrastination as a bad thing. No, first, if we want to do something, the first thing that spirit's going to do, the universe is going to show you what obstacles may be, I guess, challenging your process of that, what challenges you may face, what parts of yourself subconsciously may not necessarily be entirely in alignment with that intention. And spirit's going to show that to you first. So you want to do something, spirit's going to give you maybe a week or two of procrastination. You need to identify why procrastination is here, what procrastination is doing at this point or this juncture of the actual journey, and then decide where you want to sort of take the relationship with procrastination moving forward as far as where you are with that particular situation. We kind of have to talk ourselves through the process. Even earlier today, when I did feel that spirit of procrastination, I'm like, look, I need to get this done because this is something that I need to commit to. It's not just something that I want to do for myself. I actually genuinely like sitting in this space and being able to just, congregate with people and have these open discussions. So those are some of the things that we can do, because that spirit that may be attached to us, again, that's our emotion, and it carries an energy and is very dense because emotions are magnetic. So it will pull whatever we're feeling into our orbit as a means for us to be able to experience that reality. And this is why the manifestation process is very, very, very important, because a lot of the times we think something, but then our words aren't falling into alignment with the things that we are, wanting to believe. Just because we want to believe something to be so doesn't necessarily mean that our subconscious mind has the necessary programming or the necessary neurological pathway to give us an opportunity to be able to, I guess, manifest that free of any challenges. But the beauty of that is that when we see the obstacles that may show up, that's an opportunity for us to sort of take a step back from the situation, observe it from a spectator's point of view, and maybe give yourself some advice in terms of what you would want to do differently with the situation or what you could be doing better. Because a lot of the times when we are, dealing with low vibrational reflections, entities, spirits of ourselves, these are just parts of our personality and they serve a purpose. It may not be, serving for us in that particular moment, or at least on surface, it may seem like it's not serving for us at that particular moment. But I tell you what procrastination does. It basically protects you from actually going after your dreams, after actually chasing, the reality that you want to manifest. It's a protection mechanism. It's a survival mode firewall program that we've instilled in our subconscious mind. And we have to go through a process of basically deprogramming that default program to say, okay, I thought that it was okay to procrastinate maybe up until like this time. But moving forward, I'm going to have to do a little bit better, and then start constructing and formulating a POA, a plan of action, like actionable tools that you can actually do on a day-to-day basis that will help you to be able to slowly but surely meet your individual goals, but also give you an opportunity to maybe do things in a way where you can learn a little bit more from the process. Because when we're talking about spiritual warfare, we're not just talking about our own, I guess, spirits and our own energy that we carry. We're also talking about the interaction with other people as well. And sometimes some people aren't necessarily, depending on where they are in their own lives as well, they're not necessarily, consciously aware of the spirits that they're carrying with them. And if they become used to a certain habit, it would be natural for them to just kind of give you whatever low vibrational experience of them that they feel like being in that moment. And sometimes we have to learn to protect ourselves. One of the things that I'd say when we're talking about protecting ourselves is to try not to be so sensitive to people's words, because manifestation, to me, from my personal experience, it's a 4-step process. We have a thought. That thought is then sort of connected to an intention. It's connected to our heart signature in some way, shape, or form. So it's basically connected to an energetic motion, an emotion, attached to it. Now, once that emotion is attached to it, we then carry out certain actions. Those actions basically sort of, depending on how we navigate our way through the process of the situation, those actions will determine the outcome of the actual manifesting intent. And sometimes people will say things and they're not necessarily aware of the things that they're saying or why they're saying certain things. So for your own protection, one of the things that I generally recommend is try not to take things too personally, because people are going through their own stuff as well. And half the time they're battling through their own spirits internally. You know, we are literally on a battlefield day in, day out. We're like trying to combat our own stuff, and then there's everybody else's stuff in the little mixing pot. So we kind of just have to be mindful about how we're navigating our way through the process of any given day, because even if we feel as though we're in a place in ourselves where we're doing so much work, right? And we're like, okay, I'm in a really, really great place at the minute. I can't possibly imagine anything coming to knock me off this pedestal. I've climbed, you know, molehills and really got myself to this point where I'm at the top of the mountain, right? I'm at the top of the cliff. What happens in those types of situations for a lot of us is that there's still room to grow. There's still opportunities that are there for us to be able to expand our perspective, broaden our perspective, and give us an opportunity to grow as well. So we will just get some stuff thrown into the mix. A lot of the times we think that the other person is the issue, but it's that whole saying, and this is one of the things that Spirit's been repeating to me probably for the last couple of days. It's all about looking at the man or woman in the mirror. And naturally speaking, one would assume that that's like an actual physical mirror. But then when the way that Spirit showed it to me, Spirit was like, no, go deeper. The mirror being thy brother, thy sister, thy neighbor, the people that you spend most of your time with. Like, there is a part of you, every single experience that you have of someone, that is reflecting back at you. You just kind of have to be ready, willing, open, prepared, honest, transparent with yourself enough to be able to say, okay, this is a part of myself, maybe a part of myself that I don't want to engage with anymore, that is showing up through this person. And with those types of situations, we kind of have to decide how we want to navigate through the process. Are we going to, continue to engage in mannerisms or behavioral traits that we are trying to move away from? Or are we going to continue to perpetuate those same cycles in our lives, enable these types of behaviors with our subconscious programming, and basically keep praying for change to come, but never actually do anything to invoke the change? I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I'd say with spiritual warfare. A lot of the times, and that's something that I've been sort of going through with Spirit as of recent as well. It's like people would be very, very open to asking the universe to do something really amazing, really grand, like a major grand gesture in their lives, right? And then it's almost like they want these things to just fall into their lap miraculously. But Spirit's very clear that there's a process to things, and you actually have to be willing to help yourself in ways that will allow for the things that you intend to sire and manifest into your life to come into your experience as a reality. Consistency is one of those things. What we have to do when we're speaking about spiritual warfare and the art of spiritual warfare, we are basically learning how to disengage from lower vibrational reflections, entities, spirits that we may carry, and engage in more of a higher vibrational experience of ourselves. Definitely, we have to put in the work, beautiful. Definitely. Prestige D was just saying we have to put in the work every day. Absolutely. We don't get to slack off. Tomorrow is just an opportunity to work harder than we did today. And whatever we learned from today, we take those lessons into tomorrow and create blessings from those experiences that we may have fallen short on today. And this is the importance of being able to engage in spiritual warfare. Like, you are in the process of navigating through your reality on a conscious level when we're talking about spiritual warfare. At this point, it's no longer I'm going to be navigating based on the things that I can see with my physical eyes. It's more I'm navigating the process of my growth, of my development, of my mental well-being, of my inner peace, based on the things that I can't see, but the things that I can feel, the things that disrupts my spirit, the things that basically has me questioning the reality of my every single day experiences. Those are really the factors that gives us an opportunity to peel back the layers and open up to the construct of being in spiritual warfare. And a lot of the times, like I say, we may be in a place where we're comfortable with ourselves, or we might even find ourselves in situations where we're not so comfortable with where we are. But these are then opportunities for us to be able to navigate our way through that vibration, through that spirit. And what we have to do is be willing to firstly identify where there's a flaw, a character, how can I put it? A character trait. Good evening, Kwabina. Awesome. Thank you for coming into the space. We need to be able to be open and transparent with ourselves to be able to say, okay, this is something that I'm struggling with. Because what happens in that space is that you are it's no longer a shadow for you, basically. You're no longer, scared of it. It's no longer something that is manifesting through you from your subconscious programming. It's actually something that you are now consciously aware of, and you are able to navigate your way through it because you are addressing the matter at hand. Instead of, we have a tendency in today's society to sweep things under the carpet. We don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, even though the elephant is getting bigger, because it's feeding off the energy vortex of the fear of speaking about the elephant in the room. Absolutely, Kwabina. Acceptance is absolutely key when we're talking about spiritual warfare. The more we actually accept ourselves, the less judgmental we become of other people. It's a funny thing that, we talk about being able to, love ourselves. And naturally, when we think about self-love, we will think about self-care. And that's something that, Spirit's been educating me on, the differences of that and in that since the last Cancer full moon eclipse. That's when I've been going on this journey. And it gives me an opportunity to be able to see that when we talk about self-love, it goes deeper than just the physical things that we can do to show ourselves that we care, but it's also the spiritual things that we can do to identify how much we care for ourselves. And also just giving our spirit an opportunity to let ourselves, our physical beings, know that we care. Because a lot of the times we can see ourselves going into situations that is just completely going to disrupt our spirit. And we do it anyways. I don't know why. I haven't, in speaking to my own spirit to get some clarity and perspective, understanding how my spirit engages with my ego so that we can merge instead of continuing to be fragmented individuals where my ego feels one way about something, but my spirit feels something completely different. A lot of the times when we go through spiritual warfare with ourselves, first and foremost, it's because we are conflicted within ourselves. It's because there's a part of us that wants something else, and there's another part of us that is completely different to that person. And we have to be able to honor every single aspect of our fragmented reality, because all of these facets of ourselves are the things that makes us whole and complete. So when we think about self-love, or at least when I think about self-love at this point, we really have to be able to just be open to accepting all of who we are. Kwabina 24 is saying the soul needs nourishment. Perhaps the spiritual components within and outside can be tapped into to provide that nourishment, and in some cases healing. Absolutely. That's the reality. Sometimes a lot of us are focused more on the external world, waiting for the external world to change so that we can finally feel accomplished about the work that we're doing within. But there has to come a point where there's, certain goals that we're setting for ourselves for the internal work that we're also equally pleased by, because the external manifestation will come in divine timing. It's simply an alignment. Like, people don't necessarily, I would say anyways, become successes overnight. There's a process to that. And it's not just about them thinking about the success that they need to be able to, I guess, aspire to be able to feel whole and complete in themselves. But it's also the benefit of them doing the work, the benefit of them seeing their strengths by them doing the work, the benefit of them working on their weaknesses and becoming a better person, becoming a stronger person, becoming more self-aware during the process of actually doing the work. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to navigate from point A to point B, knowing every single bump that you have gone through has gotten you to where you intended to go. And it may not have been pretty during the process of actually getting there. Sometimes when we're traveling on the journey, the destination is finally when we get to a place of feeling relief. The journey is rewarding. Absolutely. The journey is probably more important than the destination, because the journey is what makes you more of who you are. And the destination, I mean, we can think that the destination is pretty much, the end goal, but the reality is that the process is actually the end goal, because the process is what allows for you to become the vibration of the destination. Now you're all of a sudden experiencing the things that you thought that you wanted to be able to experience. The destination is really important. It is absolutely. The destination is really important, because a lot of the times we can, engage, because we talk about intuition, right? So our intuition knows things, reads energetic signatures in ways that we perhaps aren't even consciously aware of. Because it's just something, I guess, that happens at a subconscious level. It's tapped into the subtler energies that actually sort of carries our life forces every single day. But when we go into those experiences, it gives us an opportunity to make certain decisions, to become self-realized, to actually gain a full-on perspective as to maybe, I wouldn't say why, because the why is never really apparent to me, I guess, until you're sort of really in the midst of everything. But what purpose it serves, what purpose that experience serves, will be able to be shown to you at a later stage. And I think that when we are navigating through certain, I guess, spiritual elements, it's easy for us to go into places where, there's a low vibrational reflection of us that is creating and manipulating certain experiences. And we're casting people in roles in our experiences as well. And I think that that's the one thing for us to be able to really take accountability for, because we're telling ourselves a story in our subconscious mind, right? And that story is actually replaying from a belief system over and over again. And based on the story that our mind is telling itself, we're then having these manifested realities that we perceive as circumstances, where we engage in relationships with people of all sorts. We have romantic relationships, friendships, colleagueships, parentships, aunts and uncleships. We have so many different variations of ships to be able to give us an opportunity to see more and more of who we are in so many different roles and facets of our soul. So that's why when we talk about spiritual warfare, we may have tackled maybe an insecurity in our friendships, for instance, but now all of a sudden insecurity is pouring over into our romantic relationships. All of a sudden insecurity is pouring over into our work-based relationships, and we're not feeling as confident as we once perhaps were. These are things that we have to become consciously aware of, so that we know what tools we can use for what particular engagement of what forces we're navigating our way through. Corbina24 says, true, but we should aim to behave in good faith and with clean spirits, so that when you come into negative energy, you see it quick and can duck out of that low vibration space. Yes, no, definitely. That is the case for some people, but for a lot of people that are just on that path of awakening, if you will, to the reality that we're living in, that we're not necessarily just fighting physical beings or the representation of the physical beings that we're experiencing. We're actually sort of at spiritual warfare with, dark forces and principalities, and the way that they manifest is through mannerisms and behavioral traits. And for those people that aren't necessarily in those places or haven't been in that place for a long time, it's a little bit difficult for them to be able to sort of spot a lot of these red flags, if you will, these warning signs, where you've seen a person be selfish in their other relationships, but you've told yourself, you've convinced yourself, there's no way that this person's going to show up as being selfish towards me. What happens in those situations, for the most part, is that, that person will probably go a very, very long time trying to appease your expectations of them not showing you that side of themselves. But eventually, depending on the dynamics of the relationship, that person being who they are will overflow into the relationship, depending on how good they are at decompartmentalizing their ships. If a person is just somebody that is very involved, that's just something that you have to be mindfully aware of and learn tools that would protect you from somebody who is very self-involved, like being able to say no when you actually really need to say no, because sometimes with those types of people, it's a bit difficult because it can be overbearing sometimes, where we feel almost compelled to say yes when we really want to say no to something. And it's not because we're being selfish, but it's also because we know what is our limits, what is okay for our spirit, what is a level that we can go to, still be comfortable and not feel like, okay, this is far beyond what would have been reasonable for me, because everybody has their own limits, they have their own tolerance, and what may be okay for somebody else may not be okay for you, and that is okay. We kind of have to be okay with, not meeting certain people's expectations, provided that we're okay with meeting our own expectations. First, we have to identify what they are, is what I'd say, because sometimes when we talk about the art of spiritual warfare as well, we aren't aware of our own intentions because we want to see ourselves as these amazing people, right? But us being human means that we do have imperfections. It means that we do have flaws. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves about how these flaws show up and why they might be showing up, especially when we're triggered, because that's when we are getting an opportunity to see, i.e., the man or woman in the mirror, who is looking back at us through this experience. Like, how is this person showing up as a reflection of me? Are they showing up as me creating this experience from a broken part of myself, or was I tapped into my greatness when I actually manifested this experience? Because a lot of the times when we, navigate our way through the energies, because at the end of the week, guys, on Friday, 25th, we've got the new moon in Aquarius, which is basically going to be giving us, yes, we are flawed in many ways. Absolutely, Kwabina. It's going to be giving us an opportunity to be able to give our public debut with the new moon in Aquarius on Friday. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be really solidifying. Absolutely. We're only going to be solidifying who we want the world to see us as, who we want, the people around us to be able to identify us as. And Spirit's going to be giving us an opportunity to basically define who that person is at the top end of 2020, so that we can work towards becoming more of that person throughout the process of 2020. And we are going to be going through engaging in spiritual warfare to be able to get to that person by the end of the year. Guess what? If you want to be somebody that is proactive, you are going to have to navigate your way through the spirit of procrastination, and you are going to have to learn how to kick butt when we're speaking about the spirit of procrastination, because guess what? The spirit of procrastination wants to be able to, hold us back from being able to achieve our greatness. Why? Like I said, it's a firewall program. It believes that by being able to, not step forward, that's a means of it being able to protect itself, saving itself from the potential of failure, because the ego does not like to lose. Unfortunately, the ego doesn't like to lose. It gets bruised. And those are some of the things that we would have to navigate our way through. When we're speaking about spiritual warfare, navigating through, a debut into society, we have to think about, what are some of the things that we would like to do, and what are some of the shadows that are holding us back. So somebody, for instance, who wants to be a little bit more out there in engaging with the public, they might have a confidence issue. And this may be the universe giving them an opportunity to come out of themselves more and more, because, again, the astros, the planets have aligned for us to be able to have our moment, our 15 minutes of fame, guys. And that moment is coming for us. But we have to be consciously aware enough to identify, okay, what spirit is standing in the way of me being able to get from this end of the wall all the way over to the other end of this tunnel, because I need to be able to get to that place where I can experience myself in another vibration. Go for it, Kwabina. You can ask a quick question. Go for it. When we're talking about these types of situations, we have to be willing to overcome. Absolutely, Verlaine. It has to be something that is open to discussion with ourselves first and foremost, so that we can really identify how to peel back the layers of the shadows that may stand in our way in being able to achieve certain things. I had an issue with public speaking maybe when I started, I guess, being a little bit more vocal in public a couple of years ago. And I could identify that whenever I'm not even on any sort of platform, even for maybe 2 to 3 weeks, I feel that spirit of being quite shy, that little girl that's just like, oh, I've got such a cute little voice. I don't really want to put myself out there. I have to help her grow up, and I have to help her to be able to get to a place where she's comfortable being, who she is, because I need to be able to engage with the public to do what I do. And these are some of the things that we have to be mindfully aware of when we're navigating through the process, because we have these little personalities, these sub personalities that kind of, I guess, hold us back sometimes. Not in a negative way. It's not in ways to be able to just, keep us down. If anything, it's just to give us an opportunity. As Valenisa said, it's really to give us an opportunity to overcome. And sometimes we don't actually believe that we can overcome. And that's a shocker, guys. We can fake it till we make it. But if we actually don't believe the reality that we're putting out there, it's going to be very, very challenging for us. So Kwabina24 is saying, where is your biggest spiritual battle at the moment? The battle within, or the one with the external spirits and vibration we interact with on a daily? Oh, it's a bit of both. I think it depends on where the moon is on whatever day. When the moon's in a fiery sign, it can be a lot more extroverted. So there might be more of trying not to engage with the external spirits. But when the moon is in a sign that is emotional, like a water sign, then I am all over the place emotionally. And I think it really does sort of depend on where we are personally on our own journeys as well. Valenisa says, I need transformation. What I'd say to you on that is know that you've already got transformation. I will give you an opportunity to sort of, I guess, reword. Because like I said, when we're talking about manifestation, right, we have a thought, we connect that thought to an intention, we then action that thought, and then, that reality is manifested as our personal experience. But if you are, considering that you need transformation, know that you've already been transformed. You have to basically clarify to your subconscious mind and programming what the transformed version of you look like. And this is something that I work with clients on a lot of the times, because people want things, but we're not very clear on what it is that we want. So therefore, our world mentally is very disrupted. It is not clear. And there's a lot of layers on top of that. And those are some of the challenges that we need to be able to navigate our way through. It's something that is very, very, very challenging. Thank you, Kwabina. Thank you. Need to look at this moon or water thing. No, definitely. I do daily oracle guidance on IG, actually, where I'm able to just outline where the moon is, because it does impact the way that we're able to engage with people. It does impact the way that we're able to engage in ourselves. And it depends on how we are willing to do the work. And as well, it definitely just depends on where we are, like I said, on the journey. Because sometimes we get to a certain point on the journey and we feel like, you know what, I've been working hard for the last 6 to 9 months. I'm okay with just sitting here for maybe the next 2 to 3 months while I get my breath back and like regroup, and we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves about when we are at those places on the journey, because it makes a difference to how we are able to conserve our energy moving forward, how much energy we then know, how much energy we have in the energy bank, and what we are able to do with that energy, we can start planning basically. And those are some of the things that is very, very, very important for us to be able to, navigate our way through the warfare, man. Listen, all is fair in love and war. And it's not something that we need to be able to, I guess, continue to blame ourselves or anybody else for, because we're all a part of collective manifesting, guys. Like, you're not just the only one starring in your own movie. We play extras in other people's movies all the time. Have you ever, I'll put it to you like this, guys, even, have you ever been in a restaurant and it's somebody's birthday, for instance, right? And it's like they're doing the whole happy birthday tribute and you're just kind of there in the background. You are now an extra in their movie, and that's because they needed a certain vibration to be able to engage in that kind of experience to make it an even more special moment for them. And you, Spirit, personally handpicked you based on your vibration to be a part of that person's experience. Then, on the flip side of that, the same thing goes for you. When you're engaging in certain vibrations of yourself, then Spirit also has, I guess, vessels, people, delivery guys and girls to be able to deliver certain experiences to you based on where you're at on your own personal journey and where they are. So when we're talking about the art of spiritual warfare, I think it's important to note that it's something that is ongoing. It's something that is interconnected, and it's something that is necessary, guys. Like, a lot of people think that they just have to close themselves off from the world and this is going to protect them. But if anything, I tell you what, it's actually feeding the spirit of fear a lot more so than you realize, because those are the types of circumstances that builds, for instance, a social anxiety. We become a bit of a recluse. We become very introverted because we're not engaging in public interaction and affairs and activities as much. So when we do actually go out to engage in all of these aspects of these different spirits, it's overwhelming for our spirit that has been used to just kind of sitting with itself, trying to, I guess, navigate through whatever scenarios may show up. Now it's a case of us being able to identify, okay, how can I navigate my way from this social anxiety? Because I can see that this is a byproduct of the fact that I have not engaged in social settings for a significant period of time. And now, because of that, I'm having a little bit of an anxiety about it at a neurological level, because your body is going into, I guess, the default of what your subconscious mind is doing. So it's almost like your subconscious mind is in scare tactics to itself, right? And now it's in that situation where it's like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? It's a fight or flight mode. And we kind of have to be willing to, again, like I say, acknowledge and address. So just by acknowledging, okay, I do actually feel some social anxiety by this large crowd. It may even be a small crowd, but it may just be the fact that it's a small crowd with very big personalities. And you may need some time to be able to get back to a place where you're comfortable being in environments with big personalities. The art of spiritual warfare is basically us learning how to overcome our own challenges with ourselves, first and foremost, and it will give us an opportunity to be more equipped at dealing with other people and their own challenges, because the better we know ourselves, the more of ourselves that we can see in people as it shows up. Like I said, it's all about the man or woman in the mirror experience, knowing that whatever is showing up as far as your experience of a person outside of yourself is only a physical manifestation of some of the things inside of yourself that needs to be addressed. But it depends on how you want to look at the situation. Are you going to continue to tell yourself that, oh my God, what's wrong with this person? I would never react like this in a situation. Know that there may not be a part of you consciously that you feel would engage in a certain type of behavior, but subconsciously, there may very well be a part of you that can identify with that kind of behavior. And when you're able to get to a place to admit that to yourself, first and foremost, change can come from there. That's a very, very important aspect of the process of growth, especially when we're talking about spiritual warfare. And we kind of just have to be willing to Ride the waves, guys. Definitely ride the waves. Because, like I said, when the moon changes into different astrological signs, it impacts us in a lot of different ways because it affects the actual DNA, it affects the avatar, it affects certain aspects of our different organs. And for instance, today, the moon, I think, is in Sagittarius, and that's going to be triggering shadows within our lungs, and our lungs actually stores the spirit of anger. So there will be situations today that will basically be trying to engage you in bringing forward your spirit of anger, and you're going to have to work your way through those things. Why? Because there's something that you are trying to get to, and the spirit of anger is standing in your way, and not in a negative way, but it's there as a means to be able to seemingly protect you, because this is why we hold on to these lower vibrational spirits. They are our primitive natures of ourselves. They're kind of our survival instincts. So naturally, anger is there to be able to basically let people know not to mess with us when they take us to a certain place, when we have passed our tolerance level when it comes to certain situations. But you have to be willing and open to having these types of conversations to be able to get the benefits of what these situations can do for us. What I would say as well, when we're talking about these types of circumstances, we have to identify why we're angry, because anger is only a surface emotion. And in most cases, anger is usually masking hurt and pain and disappointment and sadness. So if we can take an opportunity to identify exactly what it is that we're feeling and openly discuss those things, those are the things that will actually help not just ourselves, but it will help other people that we are engaging with on a day-to-day basis, because they then aren't having to fight off our spirits. They're not then having to fight our own insecurities. They're not then having to stroke our egos because we don't have enough self-esteem to be able to say, hey, I did an awesome job today at that situation, even though I know that I could have done better in areas. We're busy going to that person. We're running to people basically to be able to give to us what we don't have for ourselves. And then by taking from them in the process, are we present enough in their lives as well to be able to have a equal energetic exchange? Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of the times, when we do have negative energetic exchanges with people, it's potentially, for one, it's a few different variations of reasoning, and I guess each to their own is what I'd say for this one. But a lot of the times when we are quote unquote happy, and we kind of get into those situations where it feels like our happiness is being challenged or tested, it's because what was the basis of your happiness? That's really what the universe is trying to ask you. What was the basis of your happiness? Was it the external factors of your current reality, or were you genuinely at a place where you were feeling inner peace? Because guess what? If your happiness can be disrupted by a simple experience outside of yourself, that means that you had to go deeper. That means that you had to go deeper within yourself to understand that there was more to the situation than you actually realized on surface. And by peeling back the layers bit by bit, it will give you an opportunity to identify, firstly, how you actually manifested that experience. Because again, like I said, we don't want to own necessarily some of the negative experiences that we do have. But good night, Prestige D. Thank you for just stopping into the space. It has been awesome. Sending you all the love, beautiful. Yeah, just being able to sit in a space with ourselves where we can be completely transparent with ourselves gives other people an opportunity as well to kind of know what we're working through. And we can then openly navigate through the process consciously. And what happens is when the universe throws certain tests at us, when the universe throws certain, I guess, challenges up in the air, we'll be able to navigate our way through the process, because it's like, okay, I made a conscious decision 2 weeks ago that I wanted to be able to meet this goal. For instance, in the new year, people are always trying to, I guess, lose weight, for instance, right? That's always a New Year's resolution for people. Absolutely. And when we sort of go into those situations where it's like, okay, I want to be able to lose this much amount of weight, you have to bear in mind, if you don't get to your target, it's not then about beating yourself up. And these are some of the things that we have to learn how to do when we're talking about spiritual warfare, how to be able to nurture our own low vibrational spirits, so that we don't feed off other people, so that we're not reliant on other people to be able to build us back up, so that we are self-sufficient and self-sustaining, and not engaging in codependent energetic exchanges to be able to build ourselves up, right? So in those situations where you haven't necessarily met your target for that particular day, okay, we didn't make it that day, but what that means is we're going to have to work harder to be able to move forward. You've done your best. You basically have to hype up yourself. You have to be your own hype man, and you kind of have to let your inner child know that you're doing a good job anyways, because this is a lot of the times why we're so conflicted with ourselves, because we're battling through the experiences of our inner child as our adult version of ourselves. So a lot of the times when we feel a certain type of way, when we basically, show up immature in situations, that's our inner child being triggered and coming to surface and manifesting through us. And depending on the program, I guess, of that child within us, it will manifest the reality as a result. It's almost like if a person is speaking to someone, right, and that person is making them feel inferior, they're going to do or say something to make that person feel inferior, just because they now want to be able to get back to a place within themselves where they feel comfortable. Doesn't make them a bad person. It's just the art of spiritual warfare. Now I'm feeling low. I'm going to have to tear you down so that I can pull myself back up. And we have to be like consciously aware as we navigate through the process of spiritual warfare, because sometimes people can get very, very deeply hurt. People can get very deeply wounded. And sometimes when we trigger people, we don't even know how deep that scar cuts, for us to even be able to, I guess, assist them in the process of the work that they need to do. Obviously, we can't do the work for them. That's something that they have to do for themselves. But we have to be consciously aware, because a lot of the times we feed people to their own spirits as well. We know a person's insecure, but we're going to be ignorant to the fact of their insecurities and say some stupid stuff to that person that is just going to feed them to that ego of insecurity. And guess what? Now we've planted a seed. Now that insecurity gremlin is feeding off that person subconsciously. Now that person's about to go down a downward spiral of self-sabotage, because something you have said has planted a negative seed to an entity within itself that was already trying to feed off this person subconsciously. Maybe there's a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old boy or girl inside of that person that has never really felt, that they were attractive, for instance, right? Because that's the first thing, that's the surface level when we think about insecurity. Of dealing with certain situations. They never felt attractive, never got told that they were, a handsome little boy or a beautiful little girl. And here you are coming into the space and you're just going to tell them, point out all of their imperfections, or old, absolutely, point out all of their imperfections, and they're about to go and be fed to that spirit of insecurity. Even to think about what you said there, Valenisa, when we talk about old as well, because I've had to broaden my, I guess, my perspective on old, because I'm about to be 30 next month. And one of the egos that I was getting rid of maybe 4 or 5 months ago was this ego that basically was programmed by society to say that, by 30, the little girl inside of me that grew attached to this identity, basically, when I speak about ego, she grew attached to this identity that by the time she was 30, she needed to be able to meet all of these expectations of society. And by me not being at that place that she was told that she needed to be in society, there was a part of myself that was very, very low. And I had to engage in that part of myself to understand why she felt the way that she felt, then go through a process of just identifying that that's not really in alignment with me. Sometimes the things that we have been taught and programmed by no longer serve us. The people that we are today, I'm sure, are not the people that we were 20 years ago, and it's important for us to be able to go through that growth. So when we're going through spiritual warfare, we're basically going through a process of letting go of old belief systems of self that have dark spirits, or I guess different spirits attached to them. I can't say that it's purely dark all the time, because those spirits served a purpose for us at one point or another. It may have looked like a dark experience in other ways, but there are other reflections of it where it's actually a beautiful thing. It's like the whole concept of the yin yang. There's beauty in the darkest of places, and there's also, light places that has a lot of darkness to it. Absolutely, Valenisa. We're all still learning. I'm still learning every single day, and I'm so grateful to learn more about myself every day by being able to be put into these situations where I can, navigate through the older variations of myself. That's beautiful, which means you're about to step into your, are you 39 presently, about to step into your 40th life cycle this year, or did you already turn 39 for 20? Okay. Well, this is more than likely going to be a very, very interesting year for you, because it's kind of setting you up for, getting prepared to go into your flows of your 40s experience. Okay, so if you're September, you'd probably more than likely be Virgo. I want to say Virgo or Libra energy, depending on where, what part of September. But with those types of, scenarios where we're constantly going through growing, we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving every single day. Okay, 24th, that means you would be around about Libra sort of energy. Okay. Well, lovely to have you in this space, beloved. What I would say is that we forget as well that as we get older, we go through different series and sequences of life, and our ages are actually symbolic of the different vibrational experiences of ourselves that we have. And, we have to be mindful of that as well, that just because a person is a certain age as well doesn't necessarily mean that they're of a certain maturity, is what I'd say. We have to bear in mind that with every person's journey, which is very, very different for everybody and very much independent based on the different people that are having their experiences and how those experiences have shaped and formed their their realities. I wouldn't say that you're a slow learner. I think, everybody learns at their own pace. I think that what I would say for myself is that I'm a different learner. I probably won't learn in a conventional way. You have to find what works for you when it comes to, how you're able to retain information and put it into, I guess, use. And again, those are some of the things that spiritual warfare will be able to do. By learning more about your shadows, you learn how to work better with your light. You learn how to work better with your strengths, and you learn how to basically not let your weaknesses downplay your strengths. You learn how to be able to let your strengths be something for your weaknesses to be able to fall back on, and it's just a case of finding the balance, guys. When we talk about spiritual warfare, it's about finding the balance, because what we may, decide to do in this situation today may not still be applicable in a situation similar 3 months down the line, because somewhere in between today and 3 months from now, we should have learned something to be able to make a different decision with the situation, something that was going to be more pleasing to maybe more people on a long-term basis. So it's a very, very challenging situation to navigate our way through when we talk about the art of spiritual warfare. But the moral of the story is, the more that we know about ourselves, the more prepared we will be to be able to navigate our way through other people's spirits that they have attached to their ego, and how those spirits are perpetuating projections. Basically, we're constantly projecting as humans. It's just depending on what we choose to project at any given time. Sometimes we don't know that we're projecting, and if we're not careful about it and we don't take it a little bit more seriously than we have done, it can actually really be detrimental to the people around us, and it can be very, very harmful, firstly to ourselves as well. Because when we get to places as well of like suicidal thoughts, for instance, because that seems to be a pretty big one with today's society, it's more or less the ego actually getting an opportunity to expand itself. But because that ego is dying, it's now giving you the illusion that the physical vessel has to go with it. And then a lot of people become very engrossed in the reality that they're living in, and they start to identify with that ego. So as the ego is dying, they take their physical lives, not necessarily realizing that there was potentially another alternative, there was potentially another option, but they would have had to sit through and ride out basically that ego death to get to the other side of the tunnel, to see the light, to be able to navigate through whatever it is that had them in that position of feeling like basically ending their physical life was the only way out of whatever it was that they were going through as far as inner turmoil, right? And we kind of have to be willing to have these types of, hey Teddy, we have to be willing to have these types of discussions with each other to basically, for one, identify where a person is on their journey, and it gives us an opportunity to know a little bit more about how to engage with these people depending on where they are on their own journey. But also it gives us an opportunity to make a conscious decision. Are these individuals that are going to continue to aid us in the process of our growing, or is this going to be something that is going to be detrimental to my growth further down the line? We have to be open and willing and honest in having these conversations to be able to, I guess, move forward. And it will help. You know, sometimes for the people that aren't so honest, know that it has nothing to do with you. It's just they would rather not be honest with themselves. And you kind of have to decide what you want to do from there. But spiritual warfare, it's an art of self-awareness. You'll be able to see things in people in the way that they don't say things. You'll be able to read their agenda, not by the things that they say, but by the things that they keep to themselves. You'll be able to read their mannerisms by the way that their body language is towards you. You know, some people, like I said, they aren't even aware that they are doing things where there are low vibrational spirits attached to certain actions. And sometimes we need to be able to sort of, I guess, hold them accountable, to be fair. You know, sometimes we see something, we choose not to say something, and then that person is fed to that shadow. And that shadow grows a bigger destructive behavior pattern and trait, and it starts to bleed over into other relationships. Instead of us just being like, hey, I've noticed that you seem to be like exhibiting signs of exhibiting signs of addictive personality. Basically, you seem to be able to like really, really, you know, if you're into something, you're just like giving your everything into something. And I think that that's great that you're so passionate about this one thing. But don't you think that you need to kind of like find a little bit of a balance with the situation? And yes, it's not for us to tell anyone how to live their life. And this is why it's important for us to be able to have conscious relationships with people, potentially that are just as open to doing the work on themselves. Because then when we're able to give these constructive criticism, they are open, ready, and willing to be able to navigate their way through doing the work. And it's just as important to them as it is to you that they're able to, you know, let go of anything that isn't really true to their character, you know. What if they're not open? If they're not open, then it's up to us to be able to let that person know, okay, this is where I'm at on my personal journey. You don't necessarily have to be here, because we have to bear in mind, like, some people are doing, you know, a sprint, and other people are doing marathons when it comes to doing this work, to be able to make sure that they're built up the right momentum, the right level of speed. And when we get to that place where somebody may not necessarily be open, because they're focused on the sprint tactic, you kind of just have to then take a step back and reevaluate things for yourself and say, okay, that's the way that they choose to do the situation. Is this something that is conducive to where I'm at on my own personal journey of this particular experience? If yes, then okay, this is a tolerance level for me. If no, I don't know how comfortable I am with this particular situation. Where can we meet somewhere in the middle, especially if it's a relationship with someone that you consider to be very, very significant? to you. So if you've got like a really deep emotional attachment to this person, basically, in order for us to be able to grow together, even in those instances where we may be operating from different vibrational flow as far as frequencies. So you may be on one frequency and they may be on another frequency, but it doesn't mean that because you guys aren't on the same channel, you guys have to be able to, I guess, separate, clear away from each other. If anything, it may mean that you guys may need to tune into these separate frequencies that you're experiencing for a while on your own. So maybe, have some time to yourself to be able to see how maybe things are 5-6 days from now, a week from now, just because people can come down, like I said, because the moon changes signs astrologically every 2.5 days. People go through a lot of different series of emotions, and the way a person may feel today, she's your boss. Okay. For somebody who is in a authoritative figure, if they aren't open, I guess, to constructive criticism, the best thing that you can do in that situation is basically watch them do the same thing that you are, how can I put it? The same thing that you are watching them do to you, or the same things that you feel like you may have a complaint about, they'll be doing it to other people. So in the process of you being able to, it's almost like you're building a case file, basically, you're building a case study. And you will watch them basically dig their own grave. So you'll see her, if a person exhibits a behavior towards you, likelihood is that they have a tendency to exhibit that kind of behavior. So watch her go through a process of exhibiting exactly the same sort of behavior, off-flowing into other relationships with other people in that space as well. Exactly. In that space as well. And what you can then do, you're building a case, you're building something to help her see herself, because like I said, sometimes people can't see themselves. Just because they're doing something doesn't necessarily mean that they can see what it's doing as far as the outcome and how it's impacting people. This is when they have allegiances to certain spirits, and the spirits have them blinded to the way that they're showing up. They're basically not looking in the mirror. They're not looking at themselves in you and seeing how they are reflecting through you. But you basically have to pretty much build your case, and then kind of have, I wouldn't say it's like a collective team thing where everybody's like, this is what's wrong with you, but just constructively. I think that by you doing this, and this, it is impacting, especially because it's a work environment, is impacting the work environment in this way, based on how these people are, I guess, interacting with you. And one of the things, and when you come to the table with a criticism, you can't just criticize a person and leave it there, because again, you feed them to their shadow, right? So you have to be like, okay, but what I think is the real issue is your delivery. Maybe the way that you're saying the things that you're saying is coming off in a very harsh and abrupt way. So maybe if you can, work on your delivery, that may help the situation a little bit better. So you kind of have to give them constructive criticism. You can't just go full on, basically tearing down their notion of self, their notion of what they feel that their character is. And you have to help them to be able to see themselves through your eyes, because that's the reality. They can't see themselves through your eyes. They're busy navigating from their contracts with that spirit. For instance, somebody that can't see themselves, she's trying to meet somebody's expectations. She's trying to meet somebody's expectations. It may not even be her true self that she's creating from, but she may feel as though she has to be able to show up. Maybe the pressure of having any sort of authority is something that is basically sending her ego into overdrive. Again, people are aware of how they want to come across, not so conscious about how they do actually come across. And those are some of the things that we have to be mindfully aware of when we're navigating through spiritual warfare with anybody, because just as much as we can see them is as much as they can see us. But sometimes as we're looking out at the world, we don't know how to equally keep an eye on ourselves in the process. So what I'd say is just making sure that we are aware, making sure that we are alert, making sure that we're transparent, honest with ourselves. If there's somebody that isn't open, help them. I know I don't have a voice. I guess what I heard in the shadow of that is that and again, because it's not necessarily just about the things that we say, it's about the things that we don't say that really speaks testament of our character. There is, I guess, a child inside you, Villanisa, who never really felt like their voice mattered. You may have been in situations where there were people in the room that were always louder than you, that were always more of a big personality than you. You may be youngest or middle child, I'm not too sure, but with those types of dynamics, you kind of have to be able to identify that you do have a voice. You very much have the capacity and capability to use that voice. How you choose to use that voice is definitely up to you, and it's about how you choose to deliver your information to people. So you kind of have to navigate your way through. What you've said to me, looking at the dynamics of what you've basically said to me, is that this person is causing disruptions to your work environment, right? But there is a part of you who has some feelings of lack of acknowledgement, right? And that feelings of lack of acknowledgement, you basically, before you address that situation with that person again, because you have to, okay, resentment, okay. Well, with you having the spirit of resentment attached towards your interaction with that person, and I can understand that because I can see that it's the way that she's kind of treated you that has gotten you to the point of feeling resentful towards her. What I would say to you in those types of situations is to basically get to a place where you aren't attached to her. What do I mean by that? She can't have any power over you. She can't have any power to disrupt your spirit, to take you into a place of resentment, because she is acting out of herself, acting out of her character. And for the most part, when people are acting outside of themselves, they will bring us outside of our own character. But because we're dealing with, I guess, spirit of resentment that's attached to your interaction with this person, you have to basically bypass resentment and get to a vibration of confidence. What will happen when you're in a vibration of confidence, navigating through that place with her? It will give you an opportunity to not basically project your resentment at her for the things that she's done to make you feel the way that you do, because hurt people hurt people. It's, again, spiritual warfare. You know, what we receive is sometimes what we want to project back out there, especially depending on the kind of energy that a person's giving us. So if you can get to a place where you're beyond resentment towards her. And what do I mean when I say that? Okay, so because they're saying to me, when I say they, I mean my guides, they're saying to me, one of the things that can be done is to be able to actually look at her and realize that it's a mask. That's the best way that I can put it, because I can see the actual insecurities that she has in herself that is being projected at people, which is making her show up as a nasty person, because she doesn't necessarily feel a certain type of way towards herself, and she's now projecting that out there into the workplace. So when you can basically peel back the layers of somebody's mask and see them for who they really are, it makes it easier for you to be able to navigate your way through spiritual warfare with their own entities, because that's somebody that is insecure within her own self, not knowing how to deal with her own insecurities, because she can't have the people that she's supposed to be authoritative over see her sweat. She can't have them see her sweat. So now she has to be extra masculine in her energy. We'll put it that way, extra masculine in her energy to be able to get certain points across. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually doing anything to get the job done. She's just now kind of deflecting from the reality that she actually has her own insecurities in the role that she's playing. You know, basically, when we can really see a person for the spirit that's attached to certain actions and mannerism, we can then release our contract with that person's entity, because whatever she has done to you has now put you into contracts with feelings and the spirit of resentment because of the way that she has basically engaged in behavior towards you. And this is the thing with spiritual warfare. There are things that people will do that will take us into different, I guess, experiences of ourselves. And we have to be able to utilize our tools to navigate our way through the spiritual warfare of being dragged into their low vibrational reflections. Because of the way that she is towards you, she has brought you into a place where you feel, I guess, nasty feelings towards her, resentment towards her because of the way that she's handled situations. And that's something that you basically are now tainted by. You know, you're now tainted by her darkness within herself that is now attaching itself to you to feed off you, by making you resentful towards her. But really, she's just an insecure little girl that doesn't really want to be able to say she's insecure about so many different things because she feels like she has to wear this mask. And that's why you're getting the experience of this person that you're getting. But I guess it's because she feels threatened. So now that she feels threatened, she's on the attack. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what's sort of transpiring with the energetic exchange here, because she feels like she has to be able to meet this authoritative figure. She is now pushing her notion of what authority looks like, which is basically demean, degrade, and deplete someone's energy for your own benefit and gain. She doesn't realize that, okay, there's actually other measures to be able to get a person to do things that you may feel like is best for them to be able to do to get the most from your experience of this individual in a work scenario or situation. But the best thing to do is not engage. Don't engage in that kind of spirit. And I know that's easier said than done, but everything that I've just said to you now, you'll basically go back into that workspace and look at her differently and peel back the layers of the spirit of insecurity that is working through her, and actually see the little girl that she is trying to pretend to be this adult version of herself the best way that she knows how. That's the reality. We're all actually kids trying to be adults, and we're just playing these roles and seeing what roles fit us best and how to best navigate our way through these different little titles that we're given by the different ships that we have, pretty much. Yeah, you do need to be the adult. You do need to be the adult and not engage in her childlike activities, because that's somebody that is scarred deeper than she actually realizes. And by her being that deeply scarred, she will only stand to cut you, basically. You know, hurt people, like I say. So when we have somebody that is in a position where they don't actually even know how to deal with the hurt that they feel inside, they're going to project it. And guess what? When we project the actual feelings of the hurt, it does actually do something. Now, a problem shared is a problem halved, as they say. So now that spirit is attached itself to somebody else, they're not having to be the only ones dealing with that spirit. And they feel a little bit lighter because they've offloaded that energy onto someone else. You see what I'm saying? The art of spiritual warfare, we have to be able to take accountability, learn how to alchemize the energies that we carry. And especially if they are low vibrational spirits that we are sort of engaging in, or we're sort of playing out the mannerisms of lower reflections of ourselves, then we have to be willing to just be open and honest with ourselves about that. Do you know what I mean? We have to be willing to just say, this is what the situation is, and this is what I'm willing to do differently. It's going to take me a while. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm willing to commit to the process. And commitment to self is probably the first and most important oath that ever needs to be taken, because we go into marriages all the time, you know, and this is why I would say, personally speaking, that a lot of marriages are ending in divorces today, because we don't have any commitments to ourselves, but we want to make commitments to people outside of ourselves. Absolutely. We have to commit to the process. We have to commit to the process. As soon as we kind of find a little bump and bruise along the way, we're kind of like, okay, I'm over it. I don't want to do this anymore. Somebody get me off this ride. I want to move on to the space where it's all smooth sailing. But that's not reality. That's a fairy tale. It doesn't really work like that, especially when we're having relationships that can very easily get disrupted by emotions. And if a person is not consciously aware of what they feel they will project that and literally word vomit all over the other person. And now that person is in a position where they are just basically attacked. Being fourth generation psychic, I actually sort of like see things how they travel. I see energy how they travel, and I see words how they travel as well. And some words that people say actually does have a very negative attachment to it. It's a very negative vibration, and when it attaches itself to a person, the way that it can condition that person, the way that it can compel that person to become, is very, very, very detrimental to that person's growth process, their own personal development. So we do have to commit to the process, because even when we want things to be smooth sailing, sometimes the bumps, again, are the things that really shows us who we are. It shows us our strengths. It shows us how much determination we have, how much perseverance we're capable of, and how much we're able to actually overcome the challenges that we may face. So when we talk about spiritual warfare, absolutely, Valenisa. It's basically giving us an opportunity to see who we are, building our character, building our sense of self, and allowing us to see more of that person. Sometimes I literally, I think it was earlier today that I was looking at myself and I was saying, really, Shakima, is this what we're doing for like the next few days? Because this is just not where I'm at personally, open engagement. We need to have more conversations with ourselves. We need to be able to, especially if we're going to commit to the process, we need to be able to remind ourselves of our why, because as we navigate through something that is a process, the why is probably the thing that's going to keep us going when we do want to quit, and it will also basically put certain spirits that may show up into check, put them in gear, just so that they know who's running ship. Just so that you can consciously be aware of like what you're doing, what your plan of action is, and how you're going to get to where you're trying to navigate through. Because sometimes, like I say, we have certain thoughts, but then there's parts of us that isn't necessarily aligned with that thought because it doesn't believe it. And we have to be able to overcome the lack of belief in our system and get to a place where we actually do believe the things that we're sort of putting out there. It's very, very important. One of the things that I'd say as a tool for spiritual warfare is journaling, writing things down. It definitely helps to be able to take certain energies off us. Kind of like how, you mentioned, Valenisa, the spirit of resentment that has been attached to you through her and your experience of her. What I'd say to you is write a letter to her. The things that you wish that you could have told her, or which that she could have been open to, write a letter to her and just have that there, have that open dialogue to yourself. And at least you've put it out there. What happens with that? Now the universe is compelled to, because you've now, made that request, you've made that petition, if you will, to the universe to say, this is something that I'd really like to experience, to be able to, have us engage in more of this kind of manner instead of focusing on the way that she is now, because you only manifest more of whatever you kind of like put your focus on. So if you write that letter, release it, put that out there, and be open to letting it go. I'm not going to say it's going to go overnight, because she's probably going to trigger you, because she's still the same person that she is before you wrote the letter. But what that does is it gives you an opportunity to take off your overflow of resentment. So you're kind of like laying that feeling of resentment down at the riverbanks, if you will, because that's how they're giving it to me. You're laying it down at the riverbanks for it to be taken off into the universe and healed and transmuted. And now you'll be able to go into the space with a fresh perspective for how you're choosing to deal with the situation. She may not be the one to be able to make any changes to, how she interacts with you, but you can certainly make changes to how you respond to the way that she interacts with you. And those are some of the things that will make a difference in the experience of people's spirits. We have to be able to become a different vibration and almost call forth that spirit through that person, just by being able to have an experience with them of that vibration. So if you would like to see her be more mature, a little bit less vindictive, a little bit less of a projector of her own insecurities, and be someone that's more projecting, positive, I guess, inspirational, sort of motivational energy within the office space. You have to be the one to be able to put that kind of vibration, that kind of experience out there. Basically, you have to become that which you intend to sire. Whatever experience you want to have in your own life, you have to become that vibration of it. You have to become that being, that spirit, and manifest from that reflection of yourself, and the world around you subsequently will change. It's not going to be overnight, but it's something that will happen in due time, and it will give you an opportunity to be able to, one, see how powerful you are, because we're all co-creating in, this reality that we're experiencing today. And also give you an opportunity to be able to see exactly how much of a voice you do have, is what I'd say, because our physical voice is only a representation of our spiritual ability to communicate. So maybe work on your ability to communicate on a spiritual level, and, the physical communication will come. Like, I do see it being able to get to a point where there's a mutual level of respect. Right now, she doesn't respect herself, so she can't respect anybody else because she's busy judging herself from her own insecurities. That has nothing to do with anybody in the office, everything to do with the, I guess, issues that she's internalizing. But because she doesn't want to have that conversation with herself, you guys are collateral damage to her ego. And this happens a lot in today's society, a lot more often than we care to actually admit to ourselves. And those are some of the things that we need to kind of, I'm not going to say stop, because I guess it serves a purpose as well. It's just, again, like I said, the art of spiritual warfare, there's a beauty in it. But we have to be able to identify when we are abusing someone with our own wounds, when we're abusing them and cutting them with our own traumas, because there are things within ourselves that we choose not to basically take accountability for. There are parts of ourselves that we choose not to see. It's like how people say, oh, but I would never be the type to do this to someone. You haven't been put in a position yet where your survival instincts of that kind of capacity will show up. That's all. You can't say that you would never do something, because we live in a world which is karmic, and it's all about energetic exchange. So it's whatever you give is what will be returned to you. And although you may feel as though you wouldn't be the type to do that today, maybe there was a part of your experience, or will be a part of your experience somewhere on your future timeline, where you're capable of such acts, and you're getting an opportunity in that present experience to be able to disconnect from that kind of behavior, to detach from it, to be able to basically just release your contract with that spirit of resentment, with that spirit of insecurity, with that spirit of frustration for another person who is just basically ignorant to their own flaws, their own inadequacies. You kind of just have to give yourself an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to release this spirit because it's just not serving for who I really feel that I am. And also, it's just not something that I want to engage in any further moving forward. When we release certain spirits as well, we have to be willing and open to be ready to give ourselves alternatives. We have to put something else in place. There's a default program that we are basically deprogramming, and in order for us to be able to make the most of things moving forward, we have to be able to put a new program in place. It's very, very important for the actual growing process. And when we're talking about spiritual warfare, we have to know what spirits we're sacrificing and what spirits we're, replacing those sort of entities with. You say that, for instance, somebody may be feeling low today because things didn't go too great yesterday at work, for instance, right? They didn't meet their targets at work. So all of a sudden, they're still carrying the offload of yesterday's energy into the workplace today. They've already defeated themselves just by that. They have brought the same energy that they felt defeated of yesterday. They're bringing that same energy into the workplace again today. So naturally, that energy is going to have the same sort of knock-on effect. It's like a domino effect. It's going to continue to basically bleed over into another day of their experience in their work environment. And when we're talking about the art of spiritual warfare, we have to say, okay, I'm not going to engage in this spirit anymore, because clearly this didn't work out for me yesterday. What can I do differently? What are some of the things that I learned from the situation yesterday that I can do differently today, moving into the space to be able to have a completely different experience? And I think that those are some of the things that we may need to be focusing on more so, if anything, to give us an opportunity to basically not have the same experience over and over. So I know you said, Valenisa, this lady, she just kind of is that way towards everyone. If she's that way towards everyone, maybe there's a day where she takes off her spirit of frustration and insecurities on somebody else, right? That's a positive day for you. You weren't in her firing line today. And again, for these people as well, if they know that they can feed off you, they will. So if she knows that she can say something to you and it's going to basically like trigger you and have a negative impact on your ego, she will, because now her spirit of her own insecurities gets to feed, and those are some of the things that we kind of have to be aware of when we're sort of navigating through the process with people, is that their spirits are feeding off us, and the way that we choose to do certain things is based upon the way that our interaction is with them, and depending on our own personal attachment to these people. If we don't feel, too emotionally attached to this person, then it's easier for us to go into a spirit of resentment, watching them basically mistreat themselves, because that's what's happening. If a person disrespects you, really, they're just disrespecting themselves. You just so happen to be collateral damage in that experience of them disrespecting themselves, because you were brought in by the universe as a mere reflection of them so that they could see how they were disrespecting themselves through your eyes. Do you see what I'm saying? All of the things that she has to say about you guys in the work environment, those are her negative self-talk to herself that she's getting an opportunity to play out and basically project. Whether or not she takes an opportunity to become self-realized by turning a lot of the things that she's projecting externally and looking internally within herself about, that's for her growing process. That's for her to be able to evolve as an individual. And I guess that's for her to embark on that journey. But we don't get to number people's days. All we do, I guess, as human reflections of each other, is to get an opportunity to engage in each other as we go through the process of growing. So it's a very, very big situation for us to navigate our way through this whole life thing, human life. We should try. It's a try. When I say try, not to judge anyone, it's very, very difficult. But when we do judge someone, basically ask yourself, whatever judgment you make of someone, ask yourself, is this something that I can see within myself as well? Because in most cases, when we dislike something about a person, it's usually something that we don't like about ourselves as well. For instance, it may be something that you're trying to overcome. It may be something that you're not really trying to engage in any longer. And then there's a person that exhibits exactly those same traits that you are trying to move away from. So now Spirit's basically giving you an opportunity to see what it looks like outside of yourself, because you've been, identifying with the experience from within yourself. And now you can see how to actually disconnect from that kind of spirit, from that kind of behavior, by seeing the mannerisms that's attached to that spirit manifesting through you. I hope that makes sense. But basically, if we are in a place of, like, your work colleague navigating through insecurity, that may show up in them being degrading towards other people, derogative, patronizing, condescending, because that's the kind of relationship that they have with themselves. That's how they actually feel about themselves. And in most cases, when people say some stuff to you, they're actually, just talking to themselves in a lot of different ways. You kind of just have to be able to read in between the lines when people say, for instance, someone would say the thing that's coming to mind, oh, you're fat, for instance. We are in a society that loves to fat shame, right? That's a person that has their own insecurities of, them not feeling like they are their target weight or their own ideal weight. And they're having that kind of discussion with themselves. They just so happen to be learning about that through you, by having you show up as a physical representation of them to teach them what they're saying to themselves in their mind, how they're going about saying it, how it's actually building or breaking down their self-esteem. and potentially what they need to do to be able to be better people to themselves moving forward. A lot of the times, the way that we have engagements and interactions with people is very seldomly about us and more so about them and what they need to be able to do, learn, and go through to be able to grow. And that's, I guess, a very, very significant part of the process. Some people won't see themselves until they're actually ready to be able to do the work, and others will see themselves and choose not to do anything because it feels like it's too overwhelming. And either way, the universe is going to do something to shake you up. Either way, because if you become consciously aware of a sub-personality that is manifesting through you, which means a part of your subconscious mind that is manifesting from a default program, basically, the universe is going to force you to either basically keep that program or flush that program out. Going to be constant dialogue between you and the universe. So the universe is going to show up with loads of different versions of that reality that you're trying to flush out until you actually make a conscious decision to be able to do something differently. You know, spiritual warfare is basically us learning how to navigate through our own shadows, learning how to navigate through our own issues, by seeing how they show up in other people first and foremost, so that we can become the best versions and reflections of ourselves. And it does go back to taking accountability for self to be able to become self-realized. So I guess that's what I'd say for me personally when we think about spiritual warfare and what goes into spiritual warfare. We have to learn how to become a little bit more equipped at fighting our own shadows before we can basically even navigate our way through anybody else's shadows. If we can be honest with ourselves and say, oh, I know what insecurity for me looks like and how it shows up for me. So I can see that that person's just navigating through their own insecurities, because this is something that maybe that's not the way that I would do it, but my son had court today. Okay. Isn't spiritual warfare an actual spiritual fight against principalities? Absolutely. And that's what I'm speaking about when I say that if a person is in their own spirit of insecurity and they are basically beating you down to make you feel small, that's spiritual warfare. You're now going through a process of actually being in battle with somebody else's insecurity, viper, demon, vulture, whatever word you want to sort of put on it. You're now being attacked by that being within them, that entity within them. And that's how it manifests. When we speak about principalities, we're speaking about principles. We're speaking about mannerisms. We're speaking about behavioral constructs. And that's the reality. Spirits that navigate through different behavioral constructs and mannerisms when we talk about spiritual warfare and in reference to principalities. Someone's principles and the way that they may be willing to navigate through something may be different to another person's way of how they would identify with the situation. But it's about finding somewhere in the middle where people can come together, because people are constantly casting and projecting their own spirits all the time. Somebody could be agitated about their own day, and you could be in a perfectly, like, you're in a state of bliss, like in your mind palace, you've been having a great day all day, and all of a sudden, because they are so agitated and they are wanting to basically have somebody feel how they feel, before you know it, just by having a conversation with them, they have taken you into a place where you're now feeling agitated, your spirit's now feeling perplexed, because they have offloaded onto you. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I've been experiencing in my home for the past week. Yes, that's absolutely it. Well, at the minute we are going through new moon energy, so there's a lot of things that are going to be changing at the minute. We're learning how to plant new seeds in terms of our own personal philosophies. So basically, spirit is asking you, who are you at the minute? And you get an opportunity after Friday, because we're going to have these new waves of energies on Friday for the new moon. After Friday, we're going to be going on a voyage and venture to finding out who is that new version of self. The person in your home that has been Mr. Potts, the person in your home that's basically just kind of like projecting their own insecurities and kind of like calling you into their vibration and where they're at in their own experience. What I'd say is this may be a very, very sensitive moon coming up for this person, and communication may not be their strong suit. Okay, this may not be a person that is open to being vulnerable. They may feel as though vulnerability is just a way for them to be hurt, basically. And instead of them being able to say, this is kind of what I'm going through at the minute, they would rather just make you feel how they feel. And then now it's both of you guys on the battlefield of whatever it is that they're feeling. It's like they don't know how to basically engage and help you understand what they're feeling by being able to communicate it with you. Instead, they'd rather have you understand it by drawing you into that kind of experience, drawing you into that vibration, that entity, basically, that spirit. So what I'd say with those types of situations, challenging as it may be, is to try not to engage. It's very, very difficult. I'll say that much. It's very difficult to engage, especially when you live in a home where this person is working through this spirit within themselves. Personally speaking, I've been in situations like that with my mum, for instance, getting into a space where I had to, during the retrogrades last year, once Mercury went retrograde, I literally just managed to find myself disconnecting from that relationship because I realized she was working through her own shadow, she was working through her own demons, and I had to work through my own mummy issue stuff as well. And it was important for us to be able to, I guess, not engage in having a reality where we were so codependent on each other in terms of our experience at that time. So what do I mean by that? A lot of the times when we're going through something, we may be codependent on other people to be able to show us parts of ourselves. But if we're willing to go deeper within ourselves and see those parts of ourselves by doing shadow work on ourselves, by being, again, completely honest with ourselves, we actually don't need to have those types of engagements with people. We're just able to just do the work ourselves. And those people they become background noise in our reality. So they kind of phase out. It's like I lived in the same, I guess, home with my mum for several months, but we didn't actually do any interaction with each other. How do you do shadow work, Valenisa? It's a very, very sensitive situation. NLP is a great way basically to be able to identify shadow working, but it goes deeper than NLP because it's kind of understanding how your subconscious mind works with your conscious mind and merging the two and not staying fragmented in your conscious and subconscious mind, because your shadows are the parts of yourself that the world doesn't get to see. It's the parts of ourselves that we judge a lot, that we choose not to share with the world because we fear that, again, we may be judged by other people because we're busy judging ourselves. So to do shadow working, we kind of have to be willing to love the parts of ourselves that are most broken. Basically, that's the reality of doing shadow work. We have to learn how to love the parts of ourselves that we feel is weak, the parts of ourselves that we feel like we wish would just go away. Instead, we have to learn how to love that part of ourselves. Yep. We have to learn how to love these parts of ourselves, Valenisa, so that that part of ourselves can be integrated in our internal light. And by having that part of ourselves integrated into our inner light, it gives us an opportunity to be able to have better spiritual dialogue with ourselves moving forward. And it also gives other people an opportunity to be able to have an example to work from as well. It's kind of like a cheat sheet because some people want to do certain things in their reality, but they don't know how. And sometimes just by seeing you, they'll be able to say, oh, wow, like it is possible. I can believe that it is a possibility for myself because here's a full-on representation of somebody else who's done it. When we're talking about shadow working, we have to basically be willing to peel back the layers of ourselves and go deeper within ourselves, because a lot of the experiences that we have as adults are actually deep rooted in our childhood core memories that have built our beliefs, and how those belief systems have been constructed is based on the way that we have expressed it through our personal mannerisms. So I'll put it to you like this. If I am in a situation whereby I feel that I need to be able to speak up a little bit more, basically, for myself, right? One of the shadows that will show up as a child, I was considered like very shy, or at least I thought I was very shy. And I have to navigate through that. Like our shadows are outdated programs that our inner child is still going by, and that inner child in most cases manifests through our subconscious mind. It's the things that we aren't actually aware that we're doing. So when I would be in situations, like I said, where it would seem like I'm shy, I have to basically draw forth the personality that is responsible for taking me away from being shy. So okay, that shy little girl, she isn't the person that I need to bring center stage. I need to bring the vibrant part of my personality out. I need to be able to bring out the part of my personality that's a little bit more engaging with people, that's a little bit more endearing, basically, you know. And those are the things we have to basically be willing to accept all of who we are, and then we'll be more integrated into the shadows, because the shadows happen subconsciously. But by doing shadow working, we get so much more comfortable with engaging with our subconscious mind. And it's a lot easier for us to be able to see what parts of ourselves, what broken parts of ourselves are manifesting what realities. You know, like somebody who has, and I spoke about this last week during last week's session. I had a situation, I think it was last week, where I got stood up, right? There was no communication, but I had to go back to the 3-year-old girl inside of me who was dealing with abandonment issues from a absentee parent. My dad was absentee. So that little girl is a shadow within my subconscious mind for me making plans, because in her reality that she experienced when I was 3, she was dealing with the pattern of unreliability. You know, I can't rely on this person, so I am just not even going to bother to get my hopes up. I can't live like that anymore. And I understand why that 3-year-old girl got to that place where she believed that, because that was her experience at the time. But we have to be willing to be able to identify what parts of ourselves is creating what reality. And that's where spiritual warfare becomes an art. That's where it becomes something that we can utilize as a tool, instead of actually having a toolbox, not knowing what tool is applicable for what actual situation that we're faced with dealing with. When I saw that that 3-year-old girl was still manifesting through me subconsciously and sabotaging potential plans that I'm engaging in, because we create our own reality, right? Based on the constructs of our thoughts that are attached to our intentions and the actions that we put forward. So with that, I had to be able to have a conversation with this 3-year-old girl and let her know that, you know, whatever her dad was going through had nothing to do with her. And that was him learning how to be a little bit more reliable and learning how to keep his own promises to himself. And it had nothing to do with her. It was just something that overspilled into her relationship as far as her experience of him. And now where I am as the adult representative of her, I need to be in a position to be able to move forward where I can make plans, knowing that these plans are going to follow through, because I'm putting forward my best foot, my best efforts, and I'm doing everything that I can in my power to make this a reality. So I then basically talk down that shadow. I talk down that reality. Please forgive me. I am, or consider myself to be, a very spiritual individual. While fighting this spiritual battle, it seems that I don't possess the power to have enough authority over the spirit to pray, bind, and cast them out. What you want to do, sometimes, and this is another thing as well, because I'm spiritual in faith as well, and in the way that you speak, I'm assuming that you're probably Christian, because it sounds like Christian dialogue, and I practice religion with my spirituality as well. One of the things that I learned about spirits in the process of how I do my own shadow work. Thank you, Valeneza. When I do my shadow work, it's not to cast the spirit out, it's to be able to understand the spirit. And by understanding the spirit, I overstand the spirit. And now I don't have to cast the spirit out. the spirit gets an opportunity to engage in a broader perspective. Now that spirit doesn't even want to be that spirit anymore. What do I mean by that? So I explained to you even about a situation where I disconnected from my mum for a while, even though we lived in the same house last year. In that kind of space, I wanted nothing more than to cast out that kind of spirit, right? I felt like the little girl inside of her that hadn't actually healed from her own childhood wounds continued to trigger my own childhood mummy issues, right? And I didn't want to engage with her in this type of dynamic. And instead of doing something that I felt would have just basically like pouring salt onto the wound, I took some time out of the situation. I went back into the space, and before I even had a conversation, to be able to dispel any kind of negative energy in the space, I prayed and asked for God's spirit to be the voice of reason throughout the conversation that we're having before we even engage in a conversation, so that it's not going to be ego attacking ego, so it's not just, oh, it's going to be my point against your point. And also when you're going into those spaces with spirits of a low vibrational, reflection, it's not about being overpowering. It's about being patient enough to help that spirit come to its own realization of itself. If you try to overpower it, you're going to deplete your own light in the process. You don't need to overpower it. If anything, you need to allow for it to come out into the light instead of you having to go into the darkness, basically. How can I explain it? So, that's fine, Valenisa. What I would say is, with that situation, even though I went into it thinking that, I had so many things that I wanted to be able to point out and say, you did this and you did this and you did this. What I actually started off the conversation with was, how has the space been for you? What have you learned? Is there anything that you can tell me about myself in the process? So now you're not going into the space going to attack this person, so they don't need to be on a defense. They feel like, okay, they're going to get an opportunity to have their voices be heard as well. And this is going to be a conversation instead of a dictatorship. I'm not going to be here just basically pointing the finger at you, making you the entire problem of the situation. I also want to know what I could do differently to be able to, absolutely, Valenisa, it is reciprocal. I want to know what I can do differently to be able to avoid, having this kind of experience of you. I don't want the spirit of this person or this part of your reality showing up to attack me, because I'm not really trying to have that kind of relationship with you. When I had that situation with my mum last year, I said to my mum, like, I want to have a better relationship with you than you were able to have with your mum, because it matters to me and it's important to me. You kind of have to basically love them unconditionally, as I guess God loves us. It sounds corny as hell, but it's the reality. Like, we have to be willing at that point to love them unconditionally, love them in spite of the fact that they're sick, because a lot of the times when we're dealing with people that have like low vibrational entities and spirits attached to them, we treat them very much like they're ill, but not in a way that we would like somebody who is physically ill, and we know that that person needs to go to the hospital and they need, radical treatment straight away. And if anything, when they're spiritually ill, it's even a worse impact, but we don't take that as seriously as we do physical ailments in today's society. And if we can treat that person basically as if they are ill and they need the appropriate meditation, and I can say medication, but I'd say the appropriate meditation. I get it. Going directly at the person is a losing battle. One has to be able to talk the spirit out of manifesting in those negative ways. Is that yes, that's it, Mr. Potts. You basically have to help that person to become self-realized, so that they release their contract with that spirit, so that they feel like they're worthy of more, so that they feel like they want to do something else. Because what will happen is that you will continue to fight that spirit, right? But the person isn't fighting that spirit. They have become friends with that spirit. That spirit is something that makes them feel protected. That spirit is making them feel as though, okay, you're getting everything that you want. People are falling at your feet. All of these false narrative that spirit will basically sort of tell them to kind of paint a picture that isn't necessarily the entire reality. It's only a part of the truth, which is a half truth, which means it's a whole lie. But you kind of have to give them an opportunity to see what that spirit is doing, because they don't realize that they're being used by that spirit either a lot of the times, and they don't realize how sick they actually are a lot of the times as well, because a lot of the times they have buried certain memories in Pandora's box. They've locked it away, buried it 6 feet under, and they don't realize that just because they choose not to acknowledge that reality anymore, it is still playing out in their subconscious mind. Just because they're not experiencing it every single day of their experience doesn't mean that it isn't still impacting their reality today. It just means that they're not aware of how it's impacting their reality and potentially why it's impacting their reality in the way that it is, So there's a lot to be said for those types of situations, but the only thing that we can do is give them unconditional love. And that doesn't mean enabling their behavior. Going to say that much. The last thing that we want to do is enable their behavior. What we need to do is basically assist them in being able to see the things that we see. So, like, people can't really see themselves, you see. It's not like, even when people that are blind, who basically sort of like wear glasses, they can only see externally, that we can't see ourselves. And even when we look at our hands, we can't see our faces. I don't know if I'm explaining that in a way that you can sort of get it, but it's just difficult for us to see ourselves. So they can't see. I feel compelled to say she, because it feels like a she sort of energy that you're navigating your way through, Mr. Potts. But they can't help the way that you're seeing them. Well, I can't say they can't help the way that you're seeing them, but why it feels like they can't help the way that you're seeing them, to them, is because they can't quite see themselves in the same reality or the same paradigm that you seem to be experiencing them. So you have to, again, be able to help them see that part of themselves. I was able to say to my mum, I see the 6-year-old girl that is feeling this type of way towards her mum, because this is how she's projecting her pain towards me, and I don't want to really be you have to be gentle, because it's spiritual surgery. You're helping this person to help themselves to basically disconnect and sever from a part of themselves that they have become attached to over a significant period of time. This is a spirit that they have basically formulated contracts with, and this spirit has been giving. Thank you for your patience with explaining that to me. No, that's okay. That's okay. I think that it's important for us to be able to have these types of conversations a little bit more openly, so that we can help our loved ones, because a lot of the times we do more damage by wanting to basically cast out the spirit. Sometimes we want to cast out the spirit, but they're attached to this spirit. To them, this spirit has helped them. This spirit has made certain, dreams come true as far as them feeling protected. And that's what the spirit offered to do at the time when they caught them in their vulnerable stage. Like, these are actually very, very intellectual beings when we speak about spirit. It's like, I'll put it to you like this, how a spirit can infiltrate a person, so that we can gain context, right? There would be a teenager, for instance. Let's take it to teenagers, right? Because this is a very vulnerable time for us as children. We're moving into the adult phase of our lives. So as teenagers, for instance, you're going through bullying at school. This seems to be a thing for, I guess, the kids of today. You're going through bullying at school, and you don't know how to be able to have that conversation with anybody to say that you're being bullied. The next thing you know, it's showing up in your behavior, your anger, for the way that you're being treated outside of the home is being brought home, and you are now frustrated with your parents. You're being rude. You're being I guess, hateful in the way that you're communicating, because this is how the people outside is projecting their own feelings of inadequacy towards you. What parents can't then do to their children, or shouldn't then do, if you ask me, to their children in those moments, is like basically paint them out as a bad person, or make them feel like they're bad people for having the experience that they're having, because we don't actually know what that person's going through. But we have to be emotionally intelligent enough to sort of say, okay, if this person is acting so far out of their character, what could potentially be going on beneath the surface? What could potentially be bubbling and erupting inside of them for this kind of reaction to be sort of coming up and manifesting through them? And we have to help them come to that realization that, okay, you are having misplaced anger. You're angry about your external situation outside of the home, you're being bullied in school. Exactly, Valenisa. We do have layers, and like there are certain layers that are overlapping other layers, and we have to, like an onion, absolutely, just like Donkey said, we have to like peel back the layers of ourselves to be able to really help ourselves to be free. And there are certain spirits that are attached to the different layers of ourselves. And as we kind of like become more self-realized, we'll be able to release some of these spirits bit by bit. And it's a process. Again, guys, like I will end exactly the way that I started. It's important for us to commit to the entire process. And sometimes, even when we're helping other people, the biggest people that we're helping is ourselves in those situations. You know, patience was what I learned navigating through the situation with my mum. And I'm so grateful that I was able to learn that lesson, because it gives me an opportunity to offload that lesson of patience into other aspects and areas into my life. And this is the thing. We think that they are the problem, but whatever they're experiencing is also showing us something about ourselves. So this may be an opportunity for us to be able to learn how to get to another level. You know, one of the things that because I navigate through the process consciously, one of the things that transpired when I did sort of, you know, go on relationship vacay from my mum was because I asked the universe to help me release the spirit of dysfunction. And because I was releasing that kind of behavior and mannerism, that's how it had to show up. I had to disengage from having that kind of interaction with someone, and then learn how to become a little bit more functional in the relationship. And that takes some time. I should take notes. Well, it's something that helps us to be able to navigate our way through whatever we're going through as well, because it's not just about them. Like, and if we keep making it about them, we actually miss the lesson that is about ourselves in the process of that as well. And that's why it's important to be able to do the work consciously, where you're saying, okay, I want to, you know, grow here. Thank you, Valenisa. Thank you. If you're saying that I said that I wanted to release the spirit of dysfunction, that's how I was going to release the spirit of dysfunction. One of the things that was showing up was that my mum's childhood wounds were triggering my own childhood wounds, and that was what was causing the dysfunction in the way that we were engaging in our relationship of each other. And that's what I learned in the process. And I'm so grateful for that lesson, because now I know that there were so many layers overlapping that was causing this combative friction of energy. And if one can, again, just safely peel back the layers by letting a person see themselves and being willing to identify ourselves and address our wounds, and letting that other person be able to come to realization in their own time, because we can't force them. We can lead the horse to the water, but we can't make them drink. So we have to encourage them. We have to inspire and motivate them to want to actually drink for their own healing, for their own process of their healing. Because we're not going to be the ones to be able to do it for them. They're going to be the ones to do it for themselves. We're simply here to, I guess, be a part of the process for them, you know? But it's definitely something that is a major factor for us to be able to grow with each other, for us to be able to learn from each other, for us to learn with each other, most importantly, because I think a lot of the times when we're in situations like those where a person is acting out of their character and they're sort of going into their low vibrational entity of themselves, the lower spirits, we just kind of want to basically either leave them in the darkness of where they are, because we don't want to get dragged down into that kind of vibration, or we want to dispel that part of them. But very seldomly do we want to understand that part of them. Very seldomly do we want to get to know that person, basically, and understand what that person's been through and why this broken part of themselves is projecting this kind of reality through them at the minute. And those are the questions that we need to be asking. Those are the questions that we need to be entertaining a little bit more, so that we can actually get to help the situation instead of hindering the process of a person's growth. You know, they'll only grow on their own time, at their own pace, and growing is painful. You know, it's hard to like go from the person that you thought that you were and continue to be open to a version of yourself that you don't yet know. It's a very, very difficult and challenging process. So we have to just be patient with the person. We have to basically be the one to put positive words of affirmations over their lives, because clearly they might not be in a position where they have enough light within themselves to be able to do so. And if we can't pray with them directly in that moment, let's pray for them when we're not in a space where we are faced with dealing with their shadows. Continue to put love and positivity over their space, continue to send them light, continue to send them the self-awareness enough to realize their power, that they can basically walk away from these spirits and walk away from these entities and choose something else. Because a lot of the times these people feel as though that's all they're worthy of, because they've been engaging in this type of reality for so long, it feels normal. And they don't know how to basically disengage from that kind of behavior to be able to work their way to the reality that they aspire to manifest in their lives. They just know that they don't want their current reality. They don't know how to be able to, I guess, get to the other place that they'd like to be. And because of that, they stay stuck and stagnant a lot of the times. They just need some help. They're just looking for someone potentially to help them take it one step at a time and learn how to basically let the process show them more about who they are, instead of them assuming who they are, and have no idea of how to be that person. But yeah, man, I think that spiritual warfare, it's important for us to be able to just give love without enabling a person, because enabling is just as bad as basically feeding them to their own shadows. And why we need to give love is because a lot of the times these shadows, these dark forces and entities, they don't know the, I guess, presence of love, or at least the story that we're telling ourselves subconsciously, don't know the presence of how to identify love in certain experiences. And because of those core memories of being broken by certain situations, they're now projecting from that broken place. And we have to say to them, hey, I know you're going through something right now, but this isn't the only alternative. Let's deprogram this feeling of, pain and neglect, and really give ourselves an opportunity to go to a place where we know that the experience that we're having of people are people that genuinely want to be around us. And the only pain that we're feeling is a love that is so great, that cuts so deep, Yeah, thank you, Mr. Potts. Thank you. I'm actually going to sign off now, but I think that it was important to be able to come in and have this discussion today, because this is where I'm at on my personal journey. I generally usually just kind of like choose these subject matters based on where I'm at in my own personal experience, because I'm sure that it's relative. And there's other people as well that would feel like it's relatable to what they're going through. So I'm glad that I could come and sit into the space and we could just chop it up, guys, and just work through some stuff. Definitely, be sure to tune in. I'm not too sure what we'll be discussing next week. I might even go deeper into peeling back the layers of spiritual warfare and actually touch in on some actual spirits, of how to work our way through them as well. But we have to be willing to just be open to ourselves and where we are on the process, as well as just being able to love that person unconditionally. Once we love ourselves unconditionally, to say, you know what, I'm not even going to judge you for that, because I can see parts of myself that have been like this at some point in time, because of this situation that I've been through. And then we can see them a little bit clearer, because we're all children of God at the end of the day. Some people are just better at pretending to be responsible adults than others. That's all I'd say, to be fair. But I'm going to love you guys and leave it there for you guys. I'm actually going to drop in the chat. This is my link where you guys can connect with me via my other social medias. You guys, I do astrology and bunch of other stuff. Basically, I do a lot on social media, and it will give you guys an opportunity to be able to connect with me via my other social media pages and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say when you guys are sort of in a position in life ever where it feels like things are too much, know that it's just enough. Do you know what I mean? It's just enough to basically take you from where you are right now to where you're trying to get to, but you just have to see why it's showing up at this time, so that you can identify what crossroads you're at. You know, what spirit are you leaving behind to be able to move forward? I literally, to get to this place, I had to let go of the spirit of doubt last year. I wrote a letter to doubt on a piece of paper. I thanked it for its services. I let it know that I'm grateful for everything that it's taken me through, but for where I'm going in life moving forward, doubt can no longer be a factor, because it's just going to hold me back from my greatness. You know, I burnt it, and I never looked back. You know, if there's ever a situation where I feel like, oh my God, I'm about to drown in doubt, I know that doubt is basically trying to engage in tying me back into contracts of doubting myself. So I just push forward and try to overcome it. If we're doing the work consciously, so if we are consciously like releasing certain parts of ourselves or certain low vibrational reflections of ourselves, then we know what lessons are showing up and we can engage in them a little bit better. But astrologically speaking, every time the moon goes into a different sign, we're already being forced by the forces and the energies to do different work on ourselves. We're just not consciously aware, because generally speaking, you know, astrology isn't something that we follow religiously, I guess. We might read our horoscopes here and there, and sometimes it may not even actually make sense to us, but we're going through something every single day, because there is something energetically every single day to trigger our growth process, to trigger our personal development. And we just kind of have to be able to go through the process of it consciously, you know? But that being said, folks, if you guys would actually like to do some shadow work, I'm pretty good at doing the work. I actually hear people's intimate thoughts. It's one of my gifts. I hear the thoughts of their demons, their gremlins, their triggers, whatever you want to call it. Their inner child basically speaks to me, because I have such a good relationship with my own inner child. And she's open to engaging with other people's inner children. So if you guys are ever interested in doing any shadow working and peeling back the layers of yourself to identify what parts of your subpersonality is what, I guess, version of yourself, then check out the link that I've dropped into the chat. I will see you guys next Tuesday for another round of tools for using tools. And we'll be able to just chop it up, guys. It's been amazing to just sit in the space with you guys and engage with you guys. So thank you guys for just being open to the process. Thank you guys for actually stopping in and listening to me. I'm going to sign off now, and love you guys and leave you guys for the week. I hope that you guys have an awesome week. Let's not forget as well, we do have a Aquarius full moon, well, new moon, sorry, on Friday. Probably means nothing to you guys in the room, but basically Spirit is asking you guys, God, the universe, the divine, whatever you want to call it, is asking you guys to make your debut into society. And the next 2 weeks are going to be very trying. It's going to be very testing. There's going to be a lot of challenges. God is basically asking you, who are you and how are you going to be showing up in the world as your authentic self in this 2020 scope that we're going to be having. So from Friday onwards, just be prepared for the waves that are going to be sort of calling forth your greatest nature and knowing of self. And just ride the waves. Ride the waves, guys, like it's high tides into your next greatest version of self, because that's all the universe wants. That's all God wants. That's all Spirit wants. And we just have to be willing to let the process unfold naturally and commit to it by committing to a spirit of excellence. Okay, guys? I'm going to love you guys and leave it there for you guys. I will see you guys next Tuesday. Until then, God bless and Shay.